Working, there we go. Welcome to NYLA 2020 On Demand. This session was previously recorded for the NYLA 2020 virtual conference. It is available to you through December 31st, 2020. Please note, once viewed, each on-demand program is eligible for 1 continuing education credit. Links to materials and presenter contact information have been archived in a Google folder and are made available after conference. Support files and documents can be found in session files below the program description. Any questions about the NYLA 2020 virtual conference digital platform can be directed to Christina@nyla.org, or you can call 800-252-6952. Creating a genealogical roundtable at your library is sponsored by LHRT and co-sponsored by RAS and RLRT. Without further ado, our presenter.
Hello, I'm Amanda Perrine, and this is how to create a genealogical roundtable at your library. How many patrons come into your library to use Ancestry.com? How many to look through old yearbooks or newspapers? How many want to regale you with stories of their ancestors and how they found out that great-great-grandpa Earl owned 3 cornfields, then got arrested for making and selling corn whiskey during Prohibition, and don't you want to see his FBI file? I'm sure you can name at least a few of these patrons. Genealogists are rather prevalent as far as patrons go at libraries, whether public, academic, or special. They likely come to your library to look at records and newspapers and use Ancestry's library edition, among other things. So debated, in 2014, there were articles published stating that genealogy is the second most popular hobby in the United States after gardening. This was prior to most people knowing about and being able to afford autosomal DNA tests, so that number has likely grown. With Ancestry Library Edition being available for home use through the end of 2020 and more people in their houses with time on their hands, our access to the database has gone up exponentially since this time last year. All of this to say, genealogy is popular, and offering programming on genealogical topics is a great way to bring people into your libraries and to cater to this demographic. What is a genealogical roundtable? The way I host them is that it starts with a 45 to 60-minute educational lecture. Then we go around the table and the participants talk about what research they have done since the last time we met and ask questions that they have, which either the host or the other participants answer. This works to build community and knowledge among attendees, as well as to showcase the resources we have at the library. We will go more in depth with each of these pieces later in the presentation. So, how can you start your own roundtable? First, you will need to figure out a time and date to hold it. I hold them monthly at the same time. When I first started hosting them, I tried both day and night offerings and found that most people prefer daytime meetings. In part, this is due to the genealogical community being in a demographic that tends to skew older, and also that in central New York, it gets dark early for much of the year, and once people are in their cozy homes, they don't want to come back out despite the best of intentions. Although we do have people who work during the day who are interested, they did not tend to consistently make the nighttime monthly meetings, which, as someone who also works full-time, I completely understand. I do offer a quarterly event that is held at night, which tends to get these patrons as well as our regular daytime attendees. Location is also a part of this step one. For most people watching this, I assume it will be in a community room at your library. A room where there is space for a U-shaped table so that people can see the screen and each other is best, since there will be time for conversation. You will also need to have the correct technology. A projector and screen for a presentation is a must. Please, if a microphone is available, use it. You do not know the hearing issues attendees may have, and using that microphone shows that you respect those listeners. The second step is that you need to find a host. I have been researching my family tree since I was a tween, and I love talking about and teaching genealogy, so I host most of the meetings myself. However, there are some topics I do not feel that I have the expertise on, even after research, to present, and for those we hire another speaker. Since going virtual, I have worked with another librarian in the system as well. We break up the presentation and bounce ideas off each other. If you have someone on staff, that is obviously the easiest way to do this. If you do not, there are a few ways to find someone. You will want to decide if you want someone who can host monthly, or if you are okay having different speakers each time. You also need to figure out how much you can afford to pay presenters. Most speakers charge between $100 and $250 an hour, though you may find that some well-renowned genealogists charge more. Once you have figured all of this out, you can speak to your local genealogical society. Many have web pages with contact information, and they may have a recommendation, either a member or someone who has spoken for them before. Additionally, if you have regular genealogical patrons, you may want to speak to them to see if they are interested or if they have any recommendations. Your library can be a great place to let new speakers try out their craft, but you may want them to practice in front of you before having them lead a group. New speakers are also a great choice if you have little to no budget. This gives them the experience and practice they need and offers you the chance to find the next big genealogical speaker. The Association of Professional Genealogists, or APG, is another place you can look for a speaker. To join the APG, people agree to a code of ethics which includes represent my abilities, services, and credentials honestly, avoiding the use of misleading or exaggerated statements, and engage in sufficient continuing education to maintain competence and comply with applicable requirements. They also pay a membership fee of $100 per year. The APG directory allows you to search by state of residence and also by non-research specialties, such as in-person speaker or virtual speaker. The Board for Certification of Genealogists is an organization whose goal is to foster public confidence in genealogy as a respected branch of history by promoting an attainable, uniform standard of competence and ethics among genealogical practitioners, and by publicly recognizing persons who meet that standard. Members have submitted a portfolio that has demonstrated their competence in research, analysis, kinship determination, and reporting skills, according to a peer review process. Once a person has received their certification, which comes with the initial CG after their name, they can also apply for Certified Genealogical Lecturer, or CGL credentials. Those who hold this credential have demonstrated their competence in selecting and organizing lecture content, providing accurate and effective presentations, and use written and visual learning aids. It is important to remember that not all genealogists go for certification due to the amount of work involved and or due to the cost. I know personally this is something that I have as a goal, but I have not yet found the time to do it just due to working full-time and having a young family. So that's just something to keep in mind. Other genealogists choose to get accredited by the International Commission for the Accreditation of Professional Genealogists, also known as ICAPGen. They set standards for the genealogical community through comprehensive written and oral examinations. This is similar yet different from BCG. Some genealogists, however, have decided to do both of these and have both credentials after their name. They also have a membership directory that is available for free on their site. Again, not all genealogists certify or become accredited, including some of the biggest names in the genealogical lecturing field. These are simply different places that you can find speakers for your library. Before the official first roundtable, I recommend with an introduction to genealogy workshop. This is a great way to judge the interest in genealogical programs, to make sure that the attendees are starting on the same page, and to promote your program. As with anything, there are various degrees of competency with genealogists, particularly those who are new to the field. Though, in my experience, many people just research and keep track of things how they see fit, not following any standards for years, if not decades, which is a reason that these classes are so important. I have set my introductory program up as a hands-on workshop, and I run it as follows. I start with my genealogical origin story. When I was 12, my grandmother had a potential cousin contact her that their mutual grandmother, Anna May, shown in the picture here, had been married with children in Canada. One day, she dropped the kids off with various relatives and hopped the border to Buffalo, where she remarried and had more children, never talking to her first family again. It's a great hook. And then I used this family throughout the presentation for continuity. We discussed general information about genealogy, like that if you get back to your 10th great-grandparents, you would have over 4,000 direct ancestors, or at least a lot of people would. My great-grandparents were second cousins, so that limits my numbers a little bit. But either way, this is definitely a hobby that you will never be bored by or run out of people to research. Then we go into the most important part of an introductory class. And honestly, something I mention in most of the classes that I teach. You need to start with yourself. It is so easy to want to start with family lore, an immigrant ancestor, or a supposed famous relative. Your last name is Washington. Maybe you're descended from George. So let's start there. Except that neither you nor your patrons are descended from the father of our country. He had no direct descendants. This is why researchers need to start with themselves, then go to their parents, grandparents, etc. I talk about going through your home for vital records, photos, funeral cards, and family Bibles. Talk to family members and close friends to see what they remember and what information they have. You will find many genealogists who skip these steps and have been researching people that aren't actually their family. This is actually a lot more normal than you might think, and we talk about that too, because I don't want our patrons to feel embarrassed that maybe they have to chop a whole big branch off of the tree they've been researching for a while. Then I go on to how to keep track of all this information. I show pedigree charts and family group sheets. I have patrons fill them out as best they can so that they can ask questions while I am there to answer them. I also show how much easier and streamlined using a program such as Legacy, Roots Magic, or Family Tree Maker can be. We talk about using research logs and research plans so that it isn't suddenly 3 a.m. and you're 2 oceans and 4 families away from where you wanted to be when you started your research earlier that evening. Then we look at Ancestry.com. One of the reasons I host these classes is to educate our patrons on our resources so that they use them. We look at census records and discuss the issues often found therein. We start with census records because they are a great document to introduce you to a family. I recommend finding a person in each census record available during their lifetime. People do get confused sometimes when looking at census records, though. Why were the names spelled wrong? Or how does grandma only age 5 years when the federal census is taken every 10 years? So whenever I look at census records, I always think of my great-great-grandmother, Anna Newer. Here she is in 1907 with 10 of her 18 children in front of their log cabin in Alden, outside of Buffalo. My great-grandfather, Albert, who I vaguely remember, is the little boy with his father. Anna is just trying to cook and clean and has one child hanging onto her leg and one screaming as they wake up from a nap. And of course, someone needs help with something else, and then a census taker comes to the door. And they ask Anna, what is everyone's name in your family? What's their age? What grade in school did they last complete? And on and on and on. This is the reason why there are often discrepancies between censuses in things like age and where children are born. Questions were asked and answered verbally, and between spelling not mattering as much 100 years ago as it did today, and the various accents of both the occupants and the census takers, it's no surprise that names are not always written correctly. So I make sure that the patrons think about Anna every time they're looking at these records and trying to decide if it's definitely the same family or same person from year to year. We also look at vital records and how to find them in New York. We talk about source citations and why this is so important. We also talk about how they don't have to be perfect evidence-explained citations as long as you've captured what you need and can find the source again if necessary. We talk a little bit about ancestry family trees and books that relatives may have published on the family and how these tend to have errors, particularly if they are not cited. It can be tremendously easy to expand your family tree using ancestry hints and others' ancestry family trees. Unfortunately, when you do that, you often help propagate errors that are found within these. By starting patrons off with this knowledge early, they won't trace that wrong family. Then we go on to the 5 main DNA testing companies and the 3 types of tests they offer. We discuss how to use these results, how to use the matches, and the ethnicity estimates. Many people now come to genealogy through these tests. We often especially find people coming in after the holidays where this has been the present that was given to them. And they need to learn that the results will only work if they are in conjunction with a well-researched and sourced tree. I then give everyone some recommended reading and other educational opportunities and send them home to start doing their research. I rehost the Introduction to Genealogy workshop once a year in October for National Genealogy Month. Now, on to the roundtable. As I mentioned earlier, there are 2 main parts: an educational program, and then a round robin where each attendee can speak for a moment or 2. While the educational piece is tremendously important, one of the things I have most enjoyed watching with these groups is the creation of a community of practice. Communities of practice are groups of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn. Genealogists are beyond a doubt a community of practice. We have a passion for family history, research our families, and through these lectures, learn how to do this research better and more efficiently. A library is an obvious location to build this community due to our mission, our programming, and our resources. Thomas Edison once said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. The inspiration when doing these roundtables can get difficult after a while. Coming up with a new topic every month after a couple years is not always easy. To start, I expand on the topics that I gave a brief overview in the introductory workshop, such as organization of the information they find, including paper and digital items, an in-depth look at census records, both federal, state, and things like mortality schedules, DNA, and vital records. We then look deeper at other record types, such as probate, land, and tax records. I add in websites of importance, such as Family Search, Fold 3, Find a Grave, and newspaper archives. We also talk about different locations both within and outside the United States, such as New England research, Italian research, and research in Ontario. And we look at specific populations, such as female ancestors, ancestors who live in a city, and immigrant ancestors. In addition to topics I can easily come up with, patrons also suggest topics. And I look to see what is being presented at conferences and at genealogical societies and other libraries. But remember, as well-regarded genealogical lecturer Helen F.M. Leary wrote, "A good lecture cannot be copied from another's material or delivery style. It must arise from our own enthusiasm for the subject and our joy of teaching. If you are using other lecturers' ideas, you need to give it your own spin and, of course, your own title." Some topics are evergreen and can be brought back every year or two in a slightly different format. This includes things like writing up your research, organizing your research, and updates for websites such as Ancestry. In each lecture, I make sure to include information about source citations, research plans, proof statements, and the genealogical standards from the Board of Certification for Genealogists. These standards are for all genealogists, not just professionals. These items are core to excellent genealogical research, and it can take repetition for a new genealogist to realize how important they are and to add them to their practice. The standards also grow with you as you increase in skill. I know I cite sources better now and have a much different way to create research plans and reports than I did when I was 12 or 25 or even just a couple years ago. Often, people think that they are just a hobbyist or just a family historian, but there is no just. Their research will, hopefully, be looked at for years to come and should be treated with the same respect as that of a highly regarded professional genealogist. I also always offer opportunities on additional genealogical education opportunities. Some of these are offerings by the local genealogical society, while some are larger conferences or week-long institutes. We talk about books to read, websites, blogs, and newsletters to check out, and why genealogical journals are useful to all levels of genealogists, even if they never intend to publish their own research. Since many of these genealogists are new, after I finish reading the genealogical journals that I receive in the mail, I bring those in so that they can pass them around and take them home to read so that they can learn more about them. That was a very generalized and quick look into the topics I have used in the past and have scheduled for the future. Now let us delve into this in more detail. This fall, I am going to be giving a lecture on using cemetery records. Once I have decided on a topic, my first step is to create learning outcomes. This is Bloom's taxonomy. As shown in this graphic by Jessica Shibatura, this is a hierarchy, and it's shown as a layer cake, where each level is built upon the previous level. The levels are as follows. First, remembering. Students are retrieving, recognizing, and recalling relevant knowledge from long-term memory. Next, understanding or constructing meaning from oral, written, and graphic messages through interpreting, exemplifying, classifying, summarizing, inferring, comparing, and explaining. Next, we have applying, which is carrying out or using a procedure for executing or implementing. Then we have analyzing, breaking material into constituent parts, determining how the parts relate to one another and to an overall structure or purpose through differentiating, organizing, and attributing. Then we have evaluating, making judgments based on criteria and standards through checking and critiquing. And last, creating, putting elements together to form a coherent or functional whole, reorganizing elements into a new pattern or structure through generating, planning, or producing. I know that was an awful lot of words. So to put it more simply, before you can understand a concept, you must remember it. To apply a concept, you must first understand it. In order to evaluate a process, you must have analyzed it. And to create an accurate conclusion, you must have completed a thorough evaluation. When we are looking at these levels, it is important to remember that not everyone is going to start at the very bottom. Due to students coming to these sessions with different levels of knowledge and experience, it may be a reminder to some students, it may be new information for others that can quickly be put into practice, and it might be information that is beyond where some students currently are, that they can tuck away for later use as their skills grow. I try to include something for each of these types in each presentation. Bloom's has a list of verbs that you can use to create these outcomes. My outcomes are as follows for cemetery records. At the end of this session, attendees will be able to describe the type of records created by cemeteries, identify where to find cemetery records, utilize the records found to build the fan club of the deceased. The fan club are the friends and family, relatives, and neighbors. And understand findagrave.com and their app. For learning outcomes, less is more. And this is particularly true for a 45-minute to 1 hour lecture. If you have more than 3 to 5 outcomes, you are likely trying to put way too much information into just this one session. In that case, break up the session. Using this example of cemetery records, the original topic I came up with was actually using records created at death. I had well over 10 learning outcomes for this topic. I broke those learning outcomes into different topics such as probate records, newspaper research, cemetery research, which includes Find a Grave, vital records, court records, and church records. I will do another session on using the fan club in genealogy, one on creating a research plan, and one on writing up research. With that one idea of teaching my patrons how to use the records that were created when one of their ancestors died, I came up with nearly a year's worth of sessions through those learning outcomes. If I had just tried to put together a presentation, I wouldn't have realized how much there was to cover, and I wouldn't have been able to cover each topic in depth to make sure that the patrons actually understood it and were able to use what they were learning. Cemetery records and most of these other topics are good for a wide variety of skill levels. Beginner genealogists need to learn about this record set beyond just tombstones. Intermediate genealogists tend to know that cemetery records exist, but they might not know how to use them for the fan club. Long-term genealogists might now know about Find a Grave, but they might not realize how easy the new app is and how they can use it to easily give back to the genealogical community and to help their fellow researchers. Now that I have a topic and learning outcomes, it's time to develop the course. There are 4 items that I create: the title and description, the lecture, slides, and a handout. The title needs to be clever and descriptive. For this class, I came up with "They're Dying to Get In," using cemetery records in genealogical research. I prefer fun titles with descriptive subtitles, but not every topic lends to that. For this one, "They're Dying to Get In" is a punchline to the old joke, "Why do cemeteries have fences?" The description needs to talk about what you will and possibly will not be teaching. If there are prerequisites, those also need to be mentioned. You will also want to have the biography of the lecturer. This should not be the same bio that is used for teaching a gardening class or for winning an award at a civic organization. Patrons will want to know why this person is qualified to teach on the topic given. For this topic, the description is as follows. Most genealogists look for tombstones of their ancestors. But did you know that cemeteries have many other records available? Learn what records are created when people are laid to rest and how to find them. The Find a Grave website and app will also be discussed. Now that those are set, the most important part, the lecture, needs to be created. The first part of creating a lecture is research. I have been reading about and practicing genealogy for over 25 years now, and every time I start to create a new lecture, I first grab a large pile of my reference books, order a few more from the library, and start reading about what I want to tell others. I look up articles and blog posts and see what new information I can find. I never want to assume I am already an expert, as there is always something new out there. Sometimes a new record set comes to light. Sometimes a record set has actually been taken away. Always a website updates the night before I give my presentation, meaning new slides and more practice is in order. This research is a large part of where the 99% perspiration that we mentioned earlier comes in. Once I've done my research, I take those notes and start to create an outline. Often credited to Aristotle, Dale Carnegie, J.H. Jowett, Fred E. Marble, Royal Meeker, and Henry Koester, we want to tell them what we're going to tell them, and then tell them what we just told them. According to psychologists, people remember best what they hear first and what they hear last. So we want to make sure that the opening and closing are particularly strong and that the information in the middle flows. For telling them what we're going to tell them, we need a hook. After dozens of tellings, I have the story of my bigamous great-great-grandma Anna down pat. It pulls people into my introductory workshop and I hope makes them want to research their family for, let's call them, unique stories and ancestors. Stories and questions tend to be the best way to grab an audience. If we don't grab them within the first 60 to 90 seconds of a presentation, they may never fully engage. This is even more so in this digital age, where someone can pretty easily minimize your presentation to look at the social media of their choice. For my cemetery records presentation, I would start with something like, John Gress disappeared off the census between 1860 and 1865. Pre-New York State vital record, this was before New York State vital records, so finding his exact date of death can be tricky, if not impossible. Luckily, he showed up in cemetery records in 1927. After that hook, we need to build the main part of the lecture. According to Judy Russell, there are multiple sequences that we can use. These include issue, conclusion, discussion, problem, analysis, solution, question, answer, most important to less important, and chronological sequence. And within these sequences, what people really want are stories. In fact, cognitive psychologist Jerome Brunner suggests that people are 22 times more likely to remember a fact when it has been wrapped in a story. Now, 22 times is a rather specific number, but even if it is 19 or 24 or just 7 times more likely, it shows the importance of coming up with these stories for our presentations. I expect this is why I love listening to case studies so much and have been trying to build my skills and put a case study in the majority of presentations I give. Case studies are just stories of how someone did research and what they found. According to Kate Harrison, stories help us grab the gist of an idea quickly. They trigger our emotions. Injecting hard numbers into your story will raise the stakes and bring your call to action into clearer focus. Bottom line, the combination of data and story satisfying both left and right brain thinking is what will ignite your audience to act. In genealogical lectures, adding stories tends to be much easier than it would be for a calculus lecture, for instance. Every record you show or person you speak about has at least one story you can tell. Create that story with the fact rolled in, and your patrons will more easily remember and implement what they have learned. For example, in my cemetery records class, I could just talk about burial permits and the information you can glean off them. But that could get pretty dull pretty quickly. Instead, I'd rather tell people that on the 28th of April, 1927, just over 62 years after he died, Forest Lawn Cemetery in Buffalo, New York, created a burial permit for John J. Gress. Originally buried in Eden in southern Erie County, one of John's children had the bodies of their parents exhumed, driven 19 miles north, and reburied in the family plot. Which way are you more likely to remember that burial permits are created by cemeteries? And how many of you now want to utilize this information to see if you have any ancestors like my fourth great grandparents, John and Caroline, who were laid to rest in not just one, but 2 different cemeteries? Weaving in the same person from my opening keeps the flow going and people engaged. This is also a reason that most presenters use their family or, with permission, their client's family. They have the documents and the stories to teach with. Then we want to end on a strong conclusion, such as, to quote Judy Russell, a call to action, the end of a story begun in the opening, or a powerful and passionate statement about the topic and its importance to the attendees, followed by a momentary pause to let it sink in. Our ending can also refer back to the title. With my cemetery lecture, I would end by talking about how through cemetery records, we found John Gress's death date, and that I hope participants would now go beyond the tombstone for their own ancestors. After my outline is set, I decide how much I want to write of the lecture. For most genealogical topics, I tend to put brief ideas in the note field of my PowerPoint. For other presentations, including this one, I write out the entire lecture so I can see the length and to make sure I include all of the pertinent details. This is personal preference, and both ways have pros and cons. Some people also write it out for practicing, then just pull out the important points to have with them when they present. Whether you write it out or not, remember that while delivering the presentation, you have to read your audience. If what you are saying is beyond your audience, or if it's too simple, you need to switch lanes and change your delivery. The next thing I do is to create slides. As a Windows user, I use PowerPoint. These slides are an enhancement to our presentation only. Showing the documents and people we are speaking about can help audience members stay engaged, but technology issues occur, and people do not want to read your presentations on the slides as well as hear you read it from the slides. Technology issues are one of the main reasons I do not recommend using websites live. I have sat in on presentations where the website went down, where the bandwidth from Zoom and everything else on a presenter's computer meant that the website was horribly slow, and watched as a website had been updated and the person couldn't find what they wanted to show us. So take screenshots and show from there. Lastly, I create a handout. As many people use the handout to take notes on, I recommend having the handout in the same general order as your presentation. Standard practice in the genealogical field is to give 4 pages of syllabus for every 1 hour of spoken lecture. I do not do that for my workshops at the library, but if you plan to present at a larger conference, that is something that will be expected. Make sure that you have the lecture title, your name and contact information, the syllabus material, and any additional references or resources for the attendees on the handout. It is also nice to give URLs. Particularly if you can do that in a clickable link form that are shown, along with the date that you last checked them as having the sites be active. As with your slides, have a friend proofread these for you if you have the ability. So, how does one get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, and the same is true on how one gives excellent lectures. Give your speech out loud and confirm the slides work and that you're in the correct range for time. Once the official educational aspect is complete, we move on to the round robin. During this time, we go participant by participant and introduce ourselves and talk about the research that has been done since the last time we met. They ask any questions that they might have that were outside of the lecture purview, and talk about any great finds that one might have. This is by far my favorite part of the roundtable. As a genealogist, I frequently talk about the research I have done with my husband and my family, and they listen, usually, and sometimes they'll ask questions, but they do not have the enthusiasm for it that other genealogists do. Giving patrons this outlet is what really builds the genealogical community at my library. Though these round robin people have offered suggestions, through these round robins, people have offered suggestions that have led to pushing back another generation or two. People have found out that they are distinct cousins, and now they collaborate on their research. People have made friends that they go on research trips with and hang out with outside of these groups. I personally have gotten to know patrons much better and found new ways to connect with them. We have also had people realize that what they like is answering the questions that other people ask, and then they have started lecturing themselves. Well, I would love to say that my educational lecturing is what keeps people coming back I think that it is the connection that really does. Full and Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community by Robert D. Putnam was written 20 years ago. But the idea that people have become less engaged in their community and need to find a way to connect to others is just as valid now as it was then. In fact, I think that COVID-19 has shown us that it is even more valid. This is really what these roundtables are about. Educating genealogists, yes, and showing our resources, of course, but the creation of a community. That is why they are roundtables and not just a lecture series or a course. Now, just like with the NILA conference this year, my roundtables have gone virtual. Due to this virtual environment, we get attendees from around the state and also from around the country, usually people who have ties back to Central New York. Due to time restraints and how tiring Zoom can get, I've switched the schedule so that we do 2 roundtable events a month. The first is the educational component with a question and answer session. The second is the round robin part. Except, unlike how we do this in person, these round robins all have a specific topic, such as newspapers, city directories, or a favorite educational opportunity. We do this because otherwise it can be hard for people to stay on track. Due to the amount of people coming, they can really only talk for 2 to 3 minutes. The amount of people in attendance has gone up, so this meeting is usually more like an hour and a half. It has been wonderful to see the faces of those people I know from in-person classes and also to meet so many new people. In addition to monthly roundtables, I also host quarterly genealogical lock-ins. Either on a Friday or Saturday night, people come to the library after we close to use our resources, such as Ancestry, Fold3, or our local history collection. People also share the websites that they have subscriptions to so that they can do a quick lookup to help a fellow attendee. Many people also use the time to do research with their own resources, but in a location where they don't have to look at the dishes that need to be washed, the floor that needs to be vacuumed, or just having other household members wandering about. We always make sure, of course, to have 2 staff on for safety purposes. In addition to the ways that you normally promote your programs, such as paper and e-newsletters, social media, flyers, and talking with patrons, I highly recommend giving the information to local genealogical societies and historical societies. The Central New York Genealogical Society has graciously put our programs on their website and in their e-newsletter, which has greatly increased our attendance. In fact, this is where most of our out-of-area people have found this because they did have ancestors who lived here. They're a member of the society and get their e-newsletter. And through that, they have been able to attend our programs and get to know other Central New York genealogists. I also recommend creating an email list of attendees for this program. A few days after the roundtable meets, I send out notes, handouts, which include those clickable links that I mentioned, and the answers to any questions that were asked, whether they were answered on the spot or if they were something that I had to look into a little bit further. I also have a Google Drive that holds these handouts and copies of the emails that all attendees can look at, whether they were able to attend the meetings or not. Thank you for attending my program, How to Create Genealogical Roundtables at Your Library. If you have any questions, I can be reached at amandaeperrine@gmail.com, and I hope that you too will be able to offer increased genealogical programming in your area.
Thank you so much, Amanda. This concludes the NYLA 2020 on-demand program, Creating Genealogical Roundtables at Your Library. We hope you continue to take advantage of all the on-demand and live programs the NYLA 2020 annual virtual conference has to offer. Thank you for helping us make this the best virtual conference ever.